Thanks a lot to Professor Doal for organizing this webinar today on a topic which is quite obviously actual and very interesting too. We have three participants in this webinar, and I will let the floor to each of them for 10-12 minutes in order to present the general problematic, and then we will turn to the questions and answers part of the webinar. So as I wrote to colleagues, we will start with Jan Charvát, who will present us, let's say, a historic part of this topic.
Okay, Michel, thank you very much. I'm very sorry for my camera, which is broken, so I hope at least you can hear me. Is it? Perfect. So I will start with the history of the Czech far right, or with a brief history of Czech far right. First of all, I would say that there exists the fascist history during the so-called First Republic, it means 1918 to 1938, which exists before the Second World War, but during the war, and especially during the communist regime, all these groups were completely eliminated. So the one important point, or at least I believe one important point, is that the far right, also the far left, or generally the extreme political movements in Czech Republic arise in the 90s from the scratch. They were, let's say, completely new, without any real or important roots in the history. It is also tied, I believe, with a quite different look of the Czech far right, which is probably typical for the post-communist Central or Eastern Europe during at least the first 20 years after the 1990, which means that during the first 20 years of existence of Czechoslovakia and then Czech Republic, we see a quite different form of the far right from the Western Europe. On one hand, we see the classic political parties. This is not very different. On the other hand, we see much stronger subcultural far right, tied mainly with the skinhead subculture, which creates maybe the half during the first 10 years and the majority of the far right during the next 10 years. So this importance of the subculture far right is very typical for Czech Republic, and I believe even for the other Central European countries. This situation is changed around the year 2013, let's say, when the subculture far right collapsed. And it is replaced, or the shape of the Czech far right is replaced by the shape of the far right, which is generally very similar to the Western Europe. So the current state of Czech far right is much more similar to the Western far right. When I start with the 90s, I can say, or I did say, that there were the political party of the far right, the so-called Republican Party, which was founded even in the 1989, but it was the parliamentary party from 1992 to 1998, with election results about 6 and 8%. From today's perspective, it was probably the radical right-wing populist party, but this term was not used during the early 90s. The Republicans themselves, they call themselves the ultra-right political party, and they work with the very classic mixture of criticism of the establishment, calling for the law and order, and with the two main, let's say, enemies. The first, the Germans, which is the question of the fear which exists in part of the Czech society that after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the communist regime, the Germans will come back to Czech Republic and take their property, which they lose after the Second World War, during the time we expelled all the Germans who lived on the Czech lands for centuries. So this fear, together with generally the anti-Germanism, which was very important for the communist era, which ends in the 1989. The Germans were the classic enemy of the Republicans. The inner enemy were the Roma people, the main minority in Czech Republic. Again, it was the Republican Party see Roma people as a race minority, which disturbed the peace, and the law and order must be used against them. This party ends or lose their position in parliament in the early election in 1998, with their gain just for 3% in Czech political system. There is a 5% threshold if you want to reach the parliament. The reason probably is, I believe that the reason is that the main reasons for voters to vote for the Republican Party were two different things: law and order on one hand, and the welfare chauvinism, let's say, on the other hand. And during the 1997-1998, we see some kind of the political but also the economical crisis in Czech Republic, and a lot of voters turn left because the question of the welfare state was much more important for them than the question of the law and order. So a lot of people change their votes from the Republicans to the Communist Party or the Social Democrats. So 1998, end of the Republican Party in the parliament, and for a long time it started the era of no far-right party in Czech parliament, which changed in 2013. The other part of the Czech far-right, as I said, was the subcultural far-right, tied with the skinhead subculture, which emerged in Czech Republic during the second half of the 80s, but it was really the marginal thing. But after the fall of communism, we see the boom of the skinheads, and it means mainly the racist skinheads. During the time of 1990 till 1993, we see the creation of some different organization, from the nationalistic to the openly neo-Nazi groups, which are tied with the international, let's say, organizations like the British Blood and Honor and the American Hammerskins. Both of them exist in Czech Republic during the time of the 90s, and in the end of the 90s, we see the shift inside this subculture, which is very typical for the situation in Czech Republic and the far right generally, or the subculture far right. The subculture far right was fighting, let's say, the inner fight between the more to be subculture or to be more a political movement, let's say. And this fight led to, let's say, 3 or 4 years in the The skinheads were more about the subculture. For another 3 years, it was more about the political movement. So after the fall of the Republicans, some people inside the skinhead subculture saw it as a possibility to create their own political party. So during the end of the 90s, 1999 and until 2001, we see the rise of the so-called nationalist socialist bloc, which was the political party which was created to get the voters from the Republicans, but in the same time we see also the rise of other political parties of the far right, small ones, National Party, Workers' Party, which were also not really successful but exist, and these two parties were not tied so openly, at least at this time, with the skinhead subculture. National Socialist Bloc, renamed for the Right Alternative, ends during the 2002 because it doesn't really work. It was more about the subculture and, let's say, subculture dynamics than the classic political party. So after that fall, let's say, of National Socialist Bloc in 2002, we see the change, and if I can say that the first 10 years of Czech far-right subculture was mainly influenced by the Anglo-Saxons, let's say, influencer groups like the Hammerskins or the Blood and Honor. During the 2001-2002, we see the change for the, let's say, German influence, and we see the rise of the so-called national resistance, which is the Czech version of Nationale Widerstand, German groups, and this group of national resistance take probably the majority of the subculture far-right activists under the umbrella, with the open neo-Nazism, organizing the white power concerts, and the huge impact on the, let's say, neo-Nazi image, but also with the political part for the national resistance, at least in the beginning. The politics, the racism was a part of their subculture, of their subculture vision. The skinhead is not just the subculture; it's more to be like a political soldier, let's say, to use the terms which was used by the national resistance. This group exists probably to 2007, and then it was replaced again by the, let's say, German influence group of the autonomous nationalists, which exist until 2013. And both these groups, National Resistance and Autonomous Nationalists, started to cooperate with the Workers' Party, which never gained any real, let's say, electoral success, but it was important for the integration, let's say, of the far right, mainly the subculture far right, because, as I said, it was the majority of the far right during that time, during the 2000, which ends probably about the 2013, when this subculture moment was around. The autonomous nationalists start talking about they don't want to do the political party, and the political activism is more important for them than the subculture, anything subcultural, which led to the complete collapse, let's say, of the subculture far right, which is probably also somehow tied with the changes in the society and generally in the questions of the far right, with the right of anti-Islamic groups, even in Czech Republic, which were very similar to these groups in the rest of the Europe. And we see the rise of the new, let's say, far right, which was much more successful than the old subculture far right. So this is for the history.
Thanks a lot, Jan. By the way, the Republican Party was removed from the list of the political parties from the Ministry of Interior of Czech Republic last month. Miroslav, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. So according to our agreement, I should deal with this also extra parliamentary movement on and movements and organizations after maybe 2012, 2013, because as Jan Charvát said, we can maybe mention also the relative success of this old style neo-Nazi movement at the turn of first and second decade of the 21st century, due to the participation of so-called normal people or people from normal population in rallies organized by these neo-Nazi groupings aimed against the Roma population, against the Roma settlements in several cities, mainly in northern Bohemia, and it was also connected with relative success of the Workers' Party in some regional election, despite the fact that that's never happened that they won the parliamentary seats, even in local assemblies. They just won seats in some municipal assemblies, mainly in the city of Dusov. And maybe that I can connect it with the year 2013, and we can see really in this year the turn of the attention paid to the Roma movement in 2013 in comparison with 2014 and mainly with 2015, 16, turned to the anti-migration, anti-Islamist hate, fueled by old style, extreme right. However, as Jan Charvát said, at the time we can see the rise of the new far right in the Czech Republic. When we look to the maybe composition or structure of this new far right, we can identify just some individuals from this old subcultural or traditional fascist or neo-fascist or neo-Nazi scene, but mainly we can see the new activists, partially from former democratic conservative organizations. They turn to the far rightist politics, and also just really newcomers. As we can mention, for example, Mr. Konvička, who was a scientist from České Budějovice, one city, regional city in southern Bohemia, and he came as a very maybe visible anti-Islamist activist in 2015 to this anti-Islamist scene. And then we can really see in this non-parliamentary level, we can see the rise of this anti-Islamist movement or anti-Islam movement, because they simply criticize the Islam as well together with migration. However, of course, they were connected also with Okamura's party projects, and about these party projects, Lenka Bustikova speak after my contribution. And we can also see at the time at least the limited support by the president Miloš Zeman for this anti-migrant movement, what was maybe in convergence to his maybe criticism towards Islam, etc. At the same time, we can see the first maybe fringes of the new movement supported Putin's Russia in its aggression against Ukraine. It's after the Maidan crisis, after the Crimea crisis, after the first Donbas war, and at the time we can see, for example, the first establishment of new paramilitary units. The first one was called Czechoslovak Soldier Against the War, organized by NATO, similar to this title, and they were able to organize some former reservists of the Czechoslovak People's Army from communist era, several hundred people, and they simply claim that they don't want to support Western politics against Russia at the time. And these two streams were partially interconnected, because then they organized also some vigilant units against this migration, etc. It was not mass movement, but they were visible in public space, and they were able to win some sympathies of broader population, I say. So And also when we are talking, if I should talk also about violent issues, there was this one maybe this could be tragicomic case of Mr. Balda, was a supporter of the SPD, and in 2017 he fell the trees and the trunks of the trees to the railways with the intention to derail train. But however, it was false flag operation because he distributed the leaflets around this place with some primitive inscriptions. It looks like when Czechs try to ironize the Arabian speak or Arabic language, so it was written in Czech, very stupid issues. It was a false flag operation under the false Islamic flag, and he was definitely he was maybe supporter of the SPD. It's a questionable if member or not, and he was later sentenced due to the terrorism. Also, he was maybe last month he was finally released from all previous sentences. So that's maybe this development in 2016-17. And then came a COVID crisis. And then we can see again the rise of the phenomenon that is sometimes called, here in Benelux countries, is sometimes called anti-governmental extremism, anti-institutional extremism, something like this. The strong criticism of the government. Paradoxically, at the time it was a Babiš government who was, this government was responsible for this strict measures against the pandemics. We can see at the time the rise of various protest movements. On one hand, it was connected with this traditional far right. The first violent demonstration was organized mainly by far right football hooligans. But then we can see again the rise of the new activists. Yeah? So during the COVID crisis, it was an opportunity for several people, including, for example, current chair of the Pro Party, Mr. Reichel, or, for example, the recent member of Senate, elected to Senate, Zvrtek Hamplova, and people again come from various milieus, and at the same time we can see the decline of the social democracy, and some people from Social Democratic Party joined this new maybe far-right movement. And then we can see the turn of this originally anti-vaxxer movement, or against lockdowns, against vaxxers, etc. Movement. They after the Russian full-scale invasion in Ukraine, they turned their attention just to the support of this question. If not to the support of Russia, then to the criticism towards Ukraine, including strong criticism towards Ukrainian refugees in the Czech Republic. And the whole issue was also connected mainly in years 2022 and maybe also 23, also with this discussion about the prices of energy due to the stop of the Russian oil and gas. So it was maybe something like a background of this rise of the far right parties. Of course, it's impossible to isolate this analytical approach. So we should discuss both extra parliamentary and parliamentary politics, because they were and they are still closely connected. And maybe that's now is the point when I can give the floor to Lenka Bustikova.
Thank you very much. We are now completely in the deep of the poly crisis and in the deep of the current situation. Yeah. Thank you. Lenka, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Let me start by thanking Dr. Perottino and the WELF for the invitation. It's also a great pleasure, challenge to follow up to excellent presentations. Above all, I would like to say that all the views that I expressed during this roundtable are my own views and not the views of the University of Florida. And I might also diverge and converge in my views with the colleagues, but I think we can sort it out. I was asked to prepare a few remarks about the post-2013 situation of the far right, namely in the electoral arena. As it is often the case, far right electoral results fluctuate over time, but I think that main reason why the far right in the Czech Republic made a comeback after 2013. I think it can be attributed to their ability to respond to external stimuli and learn from the West. And so that is, I think, primarily the case with the second wave of far right in the Czech Republic that started around 2013. In overall, the electoral strength in the Czech Republic can be characterized as moderately successful, but nothing to brag about. It's rarely that the parties cross 10% of the threshold. In terms of ferocity, Czech far-right parties that manage to get elected into the parliament have radical agendas, but they're not trying to tear the house down. They do test the democratic guardrails, but do not advocate for an overhaul of the system. Also, especially with Okamura, and I'm sure this will be discussed in the Q&A, I think their anti-establishment credentials have been eroded by serving in the parliament, and I suspect that this process will continue and might eventually be a downfall of Okamura's party. It is also absolutely important for us to recognize and discuss that for the first time since 1989, the far right serves in a governing coalition, and the leader of the major far-right party, Tomio Okamura, is now the Speaker of the lower house of the Chamber of Deputies of the Parliament, which means that Okamura is now the second in the Czech constitutional order regarding parliamentary authority. Okamura was elected as Speaker in November 2025. It is too early to tell how the coalition of ANO's Andrej Babiš with Okamura's party and one more new party called Motorists will unfold, but certainly it is a major breakthrough with the past. So who is Tomio Okamura? He's half Japanese, half Czech. He has a more sane brother. He is the leader of the far-right party SPD, Freedom, Direct Democracy. In my view, he's a shrewd opportunist, political entrepreneur with huge ego and thin skin, who has or had the ability to read political tea leaves. He certainly contributed to the resurgence of the Czech far-right in 2013, where he founded a new political party, Dawn of Direct Democracy. In 2013, the party won 6.88% and got 14 seats in the Chamber of Deputies. Okamura consolidated the far-right vote, and this was mentioned already by the speakers before me. This is the time when the Czech far-right westernized. They learned from their Western far-right colleagues. So the Okamura's anti-established Dawn of Direct Democracy discovered immigration, Euroscepticism, and direct voting, or an appetite for referenda to bypass institutions of representation to decide issues. In terms of Euroscepticism, the Czech electorate has a strong appetite is a very realistic approach towards the European Union, which is the legacy of Václav Klaus. A lot of the Czech electorate has a very instrumental and pragmatic approach to the EU. It views it as an important security umbrella and a free trade zone. Immigration concerns, certainly in 2013 and even later, were invented, so to speak. With some simplification, it is fair to say that until the influx of Ukrainian refugees after the 2022 full-scale invasion, mobilization against immigration was always mobilization against imaginary threat fueled by hysterical media. Czech Republic, in fact, experienced large waves of migration even before the refugee crisis, but the mobilization never targeted the real migrants, Slovaks, people from former Yugoslavia, and so on and so forth. Currently, the Czech Republic, actually, because of its periods of considerable economic growth, is a strong magnet for migrants, but they are until the Ukrainian refugees, they were not politicized. However, in 2015, as a result of Okamura's wonderful personality, the USVIT imploded from within. There was an internal split, and there are disputes over party finances and Okamura's leadership style. And just in time, Okamura left the party and took most of his supporters with him. This was 2015. The timing was perfect because the refugee crisis was around the corner. This is where we see really the full westernization of the far right. A lot of the studies of the Czech far right really point to the threat of hypothetical immigration, and also a really absolutely historical role of public media that whipped out fears of Middle Eastern migrants from Syria and Afghanistan, partly due to the political demand from mainstream ANO, and also due to increased readership and attention to the issue. So Okamura's timing was perfect, and in 2017 elections, the party crossed a 10% threshold. This is the largest electoral success, crossing over 10%, and it went on downhill since then on. Since 2017, Okamura's party never crossed 10%. In 2021, they received 9.5%. And actually, its recent electoral result, 7.78 in 2025 elections, was marked by disappointment. In terms of ideology, SPD modified and adapted its ideological offerings when compared to its glory days of running on anti-Islam platform. It's not necessarily Islam who did, but the mobilization in the current cycle was against Ukrainian refugees, still anti-immigrant. Some foreign policy positions, put sparkle in Putin's eyes. It's an anti-EU party, very lukewarm about NATO. And so it's a party that sort of advocates for Czech interests first, and it's quite remarkable, it advocates for referendum of Czech withdrawal from the EU and NATO, which is not consistent with Babiš's views. In fact, one of the articles in Czech public radio called the recent elections in relationship to SPD, the paradox of SPD, Freedom, Direct Democracy Party, from the worst electoral results to the most political power, partly because of the governing coalition and the speakership. However, the recent elections of 2025 really revealed trouble in number one. In 2025, the party went into a soft coalition with Party Pro, Právo, Respect Odbornost, Law, Respect, Expertise. These two parties cooperated electorally. This was not a formal or legal coalition that would require a much higher threshold, and it allowed Pro to gain parliamentary seats. Okamura was quite humiliated because Reichel, the leader of the coalition that wasn't a coalition, got more preferential votes. So Okamura got less, even though he was the leader of the ticket, and also his preferential votes declined. So, Paradise lost a little bit, and it can sort of signal, it's a sign of sort of declining or voter shift in support for him. Another trouble in Paradise is the rise of a new party, Motorists. I just got an email from Populist. Is this a new far-right party? My answer is I don't know. It's probably on the borderline. It is also a party that's currently serving in a governing coalition. It's giving the prime minister a lot of headaches. But, hypothetically, the party can eventually siphon out votes from Okamura due to their strong Eurosceptic program. They oppose the Green Deal, and the two leaders are quite mad. And so I am really mad, and they have a strong anti-establishment credentials, which I think Okamura has been losing for quite some time. The Motorists, I would not say it's a far-right party, but it opposes environmental regulation, and it's for national interest. So again, they can be an electoral threat, hypothetically. The third trouble of Paradise is the emergence or existence of left-wing, extreme radical and radical right parties that are out of parliament, which is Přísaha Oath on the right and Stačilo Enough on the left. They didn't cross the 5% electoral threshold, but there is also ideological overlap with Okamura, advocating for national interest, opposition to NATO, Euroscepticism, anti-elite appeal, anti-corruption appeal, which obviously Okamura no longer has. And so there's also a potential that there's a new successor party of very extreme parties, such as Workers' Party of Social Justice, can emerge. But before I conclude, I would like to comment on the Czech case as being unique in three aspects, to sort of think us through about some differences and similarities with other countries. So I think there are three aspects to Czech uniqueness. Number one, the Czech far right does not make strong positions on the state of Israel. That is, it's not a divisive issue or hasn't been for as strongly as in the West, And that's because the Czech party system has one of the most pro-Israeli foreign policies in Europe. So this is reflected also in positions of the far-right parties when this is not a divisive issue, more or less. You know, coming from the United States, and again, all views are my own, the rhetoric is ugly, but the parties are quite soft, especially if you compare it to some Western parties or Europe parties that have much more appetite for violence. So it's ugly, but reasonable. And finally, the big unique characteristic of the Czech far right is that the us versus them, or the nativist demarcation line, is still ethnic. So the Czech far right mobilizes against Roma, now the refugees, non-European Muslims, but does not activate the social conservative cleavage around abortion, LGBTQ, women's rights. So that's the portfolio is mostly ethnic. It's a big difference with other countries where they are switching portfolios or adding. So even what Miroslav Mareš was saying, Zvrtek Hamplova is not under the ticket of the far right, and actually a lot of the very socially conservative politicians are in mainstream parties. In general, of course, there is always room for far right in the Czech system. I think the coalition with ANO and Babiš is going to be dangerous for Okamura. He might eventually swallow him, as he did Social Democrats before him. And I think it's possible the party is currently a bit out of shape, a little bit on the fat side. And so it's possible that a more assertive and fit party might replace him. We shouldn't be in the business of predictions, but I think it's possible that Babiš's coalition government might eventually suffocate their two partners, and we will see an emergence of a slightly modified new far-right party in the future that will able to cross an electoral threshold of 5%. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks a lot to all three contributors. We can switch now to the question and answers part of this webinar, and so we can take 2 or 3 questions, and maybe in order to wait for some questions, I just can mention, for instance, that actually in the Czech lower chamber of the parliament, the far right is sitting on the far left. And on the far right, you have the liberals from the Mayor's party. So it's another paradoxical situation in the Czech politics. So maybe I cannot see a question or a raised hand. Yes, Marek, please.
Yes, thank you for a fantastic contribution and for the seminar. I'm wondering about ANO a little bit, because like ANO from 2013 isn't ANO from 2017, and it's not ANO from 2025, and it certainly developed in a certain direction on the cultural dimension of politics, like issues related to liberal democracy. It actually sits also in a far-right group in a European Parliament, together with the motorists, together with Orbán's Fidesz party and other far-right groupings from Europe. So I would be interested, what would be your take on this? Because also like the Western media, for example, or German newspapers also talk openly about ANO as about far-right party. So I'm not saying that personally I'm sharing this view of the journalists, but I'm also unsure how to actually classify this party that is also like making inroads into the far-right electorate, and it is also like borrowing some far-right symbols, like for example red caps that are similar to those of the MAGA movement, and so on and so forth. So also, if you read actually the older manifestos of ANO, you will find a lot of like the far-right agenda related to press freedom. Now they are also talking about like changing the way the public media are financed. you will find a lot of points related to the reform of the political system, like abolishing checks and balances, essentially introducing majoritarian elements into the system, abolishing the second chamber, and you can also find much evidence of this, like from the first electoral period when Babiš was prime minister, like in terms of at least attempted kind of erosion of liberal democracy, but not so successful due to the strong checks and balances actually enshrined in the Czech constitution and political system. So yeah, I'm puzzled by this, and that's what I will leave the question. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jean-Michel.
Yes, Marek, I have the same questions about ANO. It's, I think, a very important question, and it is very interesting for me to see that you don't speak about ANO naturally. Then it's very interesting. But I have another questions for the political parties. Traditionally, to have some history, some heroes, historical heroes, can be very important. And then I want to receive some information because I don't know if the radical right in Czech Republic use some heroes during inter period, some, I don't know, some artists, some intellectuals, some who can be the link between the beautiful and long and marvelous Czech history, so beautiful. You need some heroes to make the bridge with the present. And then I don't know if you can give me some information, because really the Czech case without a strong history is very important to understand. Thank you very much.
So we have already two very large and big questions. So we will start with Jan Charvát. Just take the question you want to answer.
I just wanted to ask which one should I
It's your
try
business.
to answer. Okay, I will start. At least at my take on ANO. When the ANO first came to the Czech politics, it looks like the, let's say, normal right-wing party, and it almost kills the classic, let's say, established right-wing parties. But then it changed for the left, and it really kills the Social Democratic Party. And only voters left are the ones on the far right. And I think, or this is what I see, is that ANO goes where the voters goes. So it's more, let's say, I believe that the ANO is more the firm business party, not so ideological, but more, let's say, populist from its nature, let's say. And the far right and the far right narratives are strong today, so the ANO is able to use it and work on it. But it's, I believe, also important to say that there are the difference, the ANO in Czech Republic and ANO in European Parliament. ANO in Czech Republic, they call themselves the conservatives, but also with a huge impact for the, let's say, the social questions for the Czech people, for our people, which is a term used very often. And the membership of the Patriots, it's not, it seems that it's not really important for the Czech audience. And I know it's not really use it very much on this moment. So we are not used to see the ANO as a far-right party, even if I believe that a lot of people will agree, I mean, in the academy, that this is the populist party. But I have to say that well, I believe that a lot of people on the West say that MAGA movement is definitely the far right, and maybe even the Republican Party today in the United States is a far right, and it is not very common in Czech Republic. I think that we don't want to use these terms for the MAGA movement, at least when I'm talking about the public sphere and the universities. So maybe this is one of the reasons why we don't talk and don't think about the ANO as the far right. But in fact, I'm not thinking about the ANO as a far right party. I see it more as a populist party.
Miroslav?
Okay, I agree with Jan Charvát. Generally, yeah, towards ANO, maybe that I can add that ANO is firstly characterized by the dominance of Andrej Babiš, firstly, and really it depends on his decisions. But on the other hand, we can see various streams within the and factions within the ANO. Also from the ideological point of view, we can see maybe people who are more familiar with this term to the maybe, I don't know, far right politics, but at least to this EU far right. And on the other hand, we can still see also some moderate politicians within the in ANO party. So that's not. That's relatively broad party from the point of view of ideological background of activists on one hand. On the other hand, we can see this really the strong leadership leaders role of the Andrej Babiš. Yeah? Definitely, I don't know if I can use the theory or conceptualization. Kasmade wrote, I mean, at the beginning of first decade of 21st century, a paper about the identification of party families. He used 3 criteria: firstly, the origin; secondly, the politics; and thirdly, the transnational context. So from the point of view of origin, it is not far-right party. From the politics, it's questionable. From the point of view of translational context, recently, yes. However, I agree also with Jan Charvát. He said that for example, the connections to FPE, to Freedom Party of Austria, are not so strongly used. More is used this link to Orbán in Hungary, maybe also to Fico, and then we can also discuss maybe the whole ideological background, and this is maybe I can connect it also with second question, but Jean-Michel Bell to this historical heroes, as he said, because we can see also in the background of SPD and partially ANO, not the traditions of this maybe fascist far right from the first Czechoslovak Republic, maybe that just some individuals from SPD that try to use the legacy of Radol Gajda, but totally marginal. It was also similar to the 1990s and Slavex Party, when some activists try to maybe renew the legacy of the Czechoslovak nation, Czechoslovak fascist community from 1920s, 1930s, and it was very weak party. It was maybe around 35% of votes. So they try to maybe thematize this legacy, but as a totally marginal phenomenon. And this is also valid for the SPD and maybe for ANO. And in this context, in the Czech Republic and and also in Slovakia, we can use the term. This term was used by Polish colleague Kasper Rekavek in different contexts. He used this for maybe categorization or classification of the ideological background of many foreign fighters in Donbass conflict, but I can use it for ideological background of the so-called Czech far right, and it's a red-brown cocktail, because they can combine something like a positive legacy of Soviet era of maybe this patriotic war against Germans, etc., with recent hate against migrants, with recent hate against also minorities in this culture wars, etc. Yes, so that's also typical of contemporary Czech far right. But not for the whole ANO, just for some activists, for some supporters, and maybe it's my fault when I was talking about the non-parliamentary or extra-parliamentary background of the movement, I totally forget to mention the rise of the so-called new alternative media, because the ecosystem of the alternative media, probably also partially linked to Russia, more or less, but is also a very important phenomenon for in the background of the rise of this new far-right parties, and you have many new internet media connected with this red-brown cocktail of ideological background. And last two comments to these heroes. Really, this relevant far right, they don't use these historical links. Okay, I can mention just recently, totally margin neo-Nazis. They can thematize some issues of collaboration from the Second World War, or even this first Republic fascism, or even Sudeten German Nazism, but they are totally marginal phenomena. What is more important, they try to interpret from their perspective the legacy of some democratic politicians. Recently, mainly Edvard Beneš, President, due to his role in the so-called transfer of Sudeten Germans from Czech Republic, and he served as a hero for part of this scene. Also, thanks to his maybe cooperation with Russia, de facto Soviet Union, in 1930s, 1940s, because they can use this as a background for some pan-Slavic ideas. It's not historically correct, but simply they try to interpret this legacy by a specific way, and we can turn also to the deeper history and traditional Czech hero, misinterpreted by many ways, is Johannes Jan Žižka. Try to help in English translation. Johannes John Žižka from Trossowhausen. How is Žižka in English? I'm sorry for mistake, but it's a historical person, the military leader from 15th century, and it's misinterpreted by many actors in Czech and Czechoslovak history.
Thanks, Lenka.
Well, ANO is certainly the big elephant in the room, and in preparation for this, we discussed sort of differences and similarities. I don't think I absolutely agree it's not the far-right party, but it is the fact that it's not the far-right party doesn't mean it's not a dangerous party. I think it's illiberal. Obviously, it took some images from the MAGA movement, but the MAGA is a movement, and I think the United States does not have a Republican Party at this moment, in fact. And it's an illiberal, opportunistic party that seeks power. I do expect a great degree of democratic erosion under the current governing coalition, but you don't have to use far right to be authoritarian. There are other ways to do it. So I think sort of we should separate sort of the ideological underpinnings and erosion, which I suspect will happen. And also, Babiš is very pragmatic. I think some of the hardcore, let's say, anti-EU rhetoric does not serve his business interests and doesn't resonate with the electorate. I will just make a brief comment on the historical heroes. I think that's another exception of the Czech Republic, is that it has a useless, usable past when it comes to historical heroes. So there is no equivalent of Josef Tiso or Miklos Horthy in the Czech interwar history. And so what I appreciate about, and of course the greatest historical hero is Okamura, so we cannot compete with that really. But I think it's also quite important to understand how the interwar period unfolded differently in the Czech case, and that has consequences for the mnemonic wars and abilities to mobilize certain memories. There is not that much to dig in comparison to other countries, including some Western countries, obviously. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. We can take another round of questions. And maybe yes, Marco. And then Jacopo.
Hello, good evening. My name is Marko Katolica. I come from Faculty of Law, Justinianus Primus in Skopje. I work at the Department of Constitutional Law and Political System. It is my pleasure to be part of the webinar today, taking into consideration that I have been doing a lot of research connected to radical right, and it's really pleasure and honor to be part of such prestigious speakers today. Additionally, I have two questions. One is connected to Marek question. It's something that very often when I discuss about radical right, coming from the Balkan area, usually I tend to say that radical right energy is masked inside moderate right-wing political parties. And for example, certain parties coming from my country and coming from Serbia, they possess two wings. One moderate wing inside right-wing party that it's sending moderate messages, but also one wing radical that is somehow sending signals, radical signals, and covering the radical right energy. But in certain time, these two wings, these two messages confront each other. So my point here is there possibility, for example, do you see possibility that sending that kind of, for example, in ANO, messages can hurt the political party on long run or even on a middle run, and can open space for developing on classic radical right party? The second question is connected to something that I was doing for my PhD, and it's about transitional justice and dealing with communist past. We have seen that in Central and Eastern Europe, the issue about dealing the communist past and conspiracy theories about spies connected to communist secret service is present. What is the situation in Czech Republic, taking into consideration that Czech Republic was the first country after East Germany to start lustration process and so on, and taking into consideration Babush's background? How this topic is presented by radical right parties inside Czech society? Thank you very much. It was really pleasure to follow the webinar.
Thank you, Jacopo.
Yes. Hi everyone, I am Jacopo Vitti.
Microphone.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm Jacopo Vitti, a PhD student in political science at Université Libre de Bruxelles, and I have two questions. The first one is, how will the Czech Republic change after the clash between President Pavel and Prime Minister Babiš? Will this power struggle make Prague lose influence in the EU and NATO, while at home Babiš weakens Pavel through presidential budget cuts, sold as austerity, boosting government power instead? And could this foment riots like those of 2019 and 2021? And the other question is about the fact that ANO in Czech Republic is not perceived as a far-right party. Is a signal of a progressive flattening toward the acceptance of far-right positions? So could this reflect a broader mainstreaming of far-right ideas across Europe, where radical stances become acceptable through rebranding and strategical alliance?
Thanks a lot. Honza, Jan Charvát.
Okay, I will try to give some answers. The first was the question of the wings inside the established parties and wings in the ANO, the more radical and more moderate. I think that we cannot see this real wings in the ANO. I believe that ANO is much more concentrated on the position of Andrej Babiš as a leader. So I cannot say even if there is anything visible which should be seen as a wing inside the ANO. And it seems that in the end, Andrej Babiš is the one who is the one in charge for all things which happened with ANO and with the politics. So I don't think that this is the question which should be important for ANO. It should be important not for ANO but for SPD, as Lenka Bustikova said, where it's not the wing, but there are a lot of very different groups right now under the umbrella of SPD, and a lot of people or a lot of scholars believe that during this time the SPD will probably, or that the possibility that the SPD will collapse is in fact pretty high. The second question was, I believe, the question of the communism and generally the history of communism for the Czech far right. Again, it's maybe a little bit different. I don't think that the generally, of course, anti-communism is an important part of generally the far-right ideology anywhere, including, of course, the Czech Republic. But the Czech society, as it was again said, Lenka Bustikova, yes, talk about the pro-Israeli stand, which is very typical and very strong in Czech Republic. Also, the anti-communism is very strong in Czech society and Czech politics. So it is not nothing which should be used by the far right as a special theme, let's say. So generally, the anti-communism is very strong in Czech society, and it is not used. Or I don't think it is used in a specific way by the far right. Then there was a question of the clash between President Pavel and Andrej Babiš. Well, I'm really curious how it will works in the future. It seems that Andrej Babiš don't want to go to the open fight with the President Pavel. On the other hand, it seems, and I believe that Mr. Pavel is surrounded by a lot of people who understand how the politic works, and he choose wisely the moments, let's say, of the fight with the others, as we saw the fight between him and the Mr. Matsinka, or generally the motorists, and the question of Mr. Turek, if he should be or not the minister of anything. So I believe that the advisors of President Pavel goes on their ground they really know, and I believe that these open fights between President Pavel and Andrej Babiš will be more, or I think that if we ask Andrej Babiš, he will probably answer that he don't want to fight anyhow with President Pavel, and the real fight is made by the other people in the government, especially the Mr. Matsinka and Mr. Turek. And the last question was about the ANO and the mainstreamization of the far right. I agree that's, but well, generally, of course, mainstreamization of the far right change the situation even in Czech Republic. I believe that some moments of ANO should be seen 10 years ago as at least the radical wing populism, and now it is not seems like that. But again, I don't think that ANO use it very often. I think that the I don't know if it's possible to say that the pure populism it's really more about the amount, let's say, of voters, what is important for ANO, and not any kind of ideological stand. Thank you. This is my answers.
Thanks, Miroslav.
Okay, just short comments to your questions. Thank you for both of them. So, firstly, if we are talking about the thematization of capitalization of anti-communist rhetorics is really not the most typical issue of contemporary far right. Maybe it was more important for begins of Miroslav Mareš Republicans in 1990s when he used it as a criticism, not paradoxically not against the former communists or against the Communist Party, but against the so-called communists in new positions in the Civic Forum and other parties. And recently, if they use if this far right or also populist right use this anti-communist rhetorics, they use it against the from their point of view so-called modern communists. They mean mainly the Antifa, is if we can use this very broad way, and also the new ecologist or progressivist movement. They say they are communists, but the traditional communists, they don't use this hate, among others, due to the fact that we should turn before the time before the last election, when it was a huge possibility that in the parliament could join also the Stačilo movement, consisted of Communist Party of Czechoslovakia, some anti-vaxxer structures and marginal national socialists, etc. And at that time, the Stačilo movement was possible coalition partner for SPD and for the so the anti-communist rhetoric is not typical of this contemporary far right, just against the so-called modern communists or contemporary communists. Then also we can mention that recently is in Czech Republic issue of the new criminal offense in the penal code, in the criminal code, since January 1st of this year, is in the Czech Republic prohibited by law the propaganda and support of Nazi and communist movement and other movements aimed against the human rights and freedom. This paragraph was adopted by the previous governmental coalition or majority in parliament, and up to now nobody knows how should be this new law interpreted. And the new coalition is not a huge supporter of this paragraph or of this criminal offense. So that's one point regarding this tension between Babiš and Pavel. I agree with Jan Harar, what he said, and maybe I can add that now we can see the general polarization of the Czech society. And what is also interesting in this sense is it could be the next Senate elections, election into the Senate, because it's organized by majority principle. And now we can see on one hand maybe the agreement between the parties of former coalition, recent opposition, to send just with one candidate. And similar way, we can see now discussion between ANO, SPD, and Motorist Party, that they can agree also the individual candidates in the Senate elections. Yes, so and this is correctly why I'm talking about this with the tension between Babiš and Pavel, because Pavel is now considered as an integral part of opposition by this ANO party and by the small coalition parties. Okay.
Thank you, Lenka. If you want to.
Yeah, thank you. These are sort of wonderful comments. I'll just add a few. I think first, wings in ANO. ANO will stay in power by addressing pocketbook concerns of the voters by distributing money and targeted spending. ANO will not stay in power by hyper ideological sort of polarization, or at least that has never been the case in the past. Maybe we are up for some surprises, but it's the power of the pocketbook that will determine whether the party can stay in power. I do think this was mentioned already that Okamura has a problem similar to the Slovak far-right party, which is that some of the personalities are not members. There's sort of the Slovak National Party has personalities in it, too many different flowers, which then pull the party apart, sort of not able to really attract preferential votes. So I think this might, he might end up having the same type of issues that the that the more extremist candidates might come then from the outside. On the communist path, look, it's a country run by a former member of the Communist Party, which is the current president. This was discussed during the campaign, not a problem. And Babiš, Slovak courts declared that he was a willing collaborator of the secret police, not a problem. Won elections quite well. So I don't expect this cleavage to resonate, and I think the proof is in the pudding. You have the most two popular politicians, being contaminated quite strongly by their communist past, and the electorate is fine with that because they deliver on different dimensions, and they are sort of judged more by their recent actions. With the president, I will just add that I think Babiš views the two small parties as petulant children, would like to wipe them out as quickly and efficiently as possible. Let's see if that's going to happen. But I think to them there are nuisance. There are also personal dislikes that will probably contribute to sort of tensions within the coalition. And finally, just to make a point of mainstreaming of the far right, again, I do expect ANO to be ruthless when it comes to re-regulating public media, regulatory framework, but it's not a fundamentally party built on ideology. It's a power-seeking party that is constrained by focus groups and public opinion. So if some elements of far-right ideology resonate in focus groups, they will go for it. But if not, they will tone it down. And, in the past, when the party or Babiš expressed strong views against Islam immigration, most of the public opinion was totally behind it. So, in a way, he's very responsive. So that's the good news and the bad news of responsive politics. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. We have some more time for a third round of questions or comments. Elizabeth? Lucy, sorry. And then
hi, thank you. Oh, sorry. So this is quite a short question, and it's kind of more related to what Lenka was saying in the first part of the speech. But you talked about how the SPD was mostly focused on a kind of rational version of far-right politics, and they were avoiding the social policies so much. And I wondered if you could maybe go into a little more detail about why that's the case, because it on the surface looks like easy wins, but are they aiming for a different kind of demographic, or what's holding them back from these more social themed topics like abortion or kind of LGBT rights?
And Lynn?
Thank you for this presentation. It's very good for people who, like me, who don't understand about Czech politics, but it gave me a very good overview. I just wondered, so if I understand correctly, the far right in Czech now is called SPD, and it is after 2025, it is in government coalition with ANO, did I understand correctly? And so because I heard there is this argument that service delivery and getting things done are important for far-right parties to achieve electoral support. And I wonder, does that apply also in the Czech Republic case? Thank you.
Thanks. So we can go to the answers. Yeah,
okay, I will start again.
Yep.
Okay, fine. So the first question was the SPD and the social politics and why it is not really important, or it was not really important for SPD. I believe, in fact, that generally the far right going down to the early 90s don't really use the social politics generally. All these political parties, Republicans, SPD, etc., all of them have also the economic and social part of their political program. But it doesn't seem that this is the main reason why they are voted. it seems to me that much more important for Czech voters who vote for the far right are the question of, let's say, culture wars. And culture wars are in Czech Republic, and if we are talking about the far right, seen mostly through the migration, and it is the same in the early 90s as today, and generally the foreigners living in Czech Republic. So the otherness, let's say, is used, and it's much stronger and much more important, let's say, for the voters than any other moment. As I said, in the 1998, this social lack of this of the social program led to the end of the Republican Party. But it doesn't seem it will be the same right now, which is, I believe, tied with the question what we can see or what can really the SPD deliver to its voters, which is the question I believe that Mr. Okamura asked himself very often today, because on one hand I really believe that this moment that the SPD is a part of the coalition government is a top, let's say, of his own political career, and the question is if he can go anywhere higher, let's say, or if this coalition will be also the end of his political career, because a lot of voters, I believe, expect something which can get from the SPD, which was the problem in the past, and it was this is the reason why Okamura agreed to create this so-called coalition. Formally, it's not coalition, but it works like the coalition with the smaller parties, with the Pro and Tricolora and the Svobodní, the free ones, which are three minor more or less far-right parties, let's say, which brings a lot of very different people to the parliament under the umbrella of SPD. So it will be it is the question if the SPD will be able to deal with them, and it's probably will not. On the other hand, the programmatic of the SPD is quite different from the programs of ANO and even the Motorista parties. So it's imaginable that this coalition government will be not able to deliver any important moments for the voters of SPD, and I believe that a lot of people will not vote for the SPD anymore after this. So there are a lot of questions for the voters, and a lot of questions for the SPD. SPD should go away from the government. We will see, because we see, or I believe that the SPD is much better doing as an opposition, not as a part of the government. But there are a lot of things I believe no one really knows right now. So thank you, my answer.
Miroslav?
Okay, just maybe short comment to this social issues, culture wars, etc. Generally, SPD and partially Moto, they use sometimes the political arguments against the LGBT agenda, but maybe not so strongly as Polish far right, etc. But they sometimes use it. They also are against the education related to transsexual issues in schools, etc. But not. It is not the main topic of the agenda, and it's really contrast to Hungary, to Russia, to Poland, etc. This is the abortion issue, because it's something what is deeply rooted in a Czech broader part of society, that this choice of women in this sense is relatively respected. Yeah. So that's just the issue of marginal ultra-Catholic movements. They are connected also with some of these parties, but they are not dominant there. We will now this could be now interesting, the March for Family in April is organized by these Catholicians. This every year the main part of their politics or main event of their politics, and but on the other hand, they are not just linked to this far right. They are also maybe independent, and they try to promote their own policy. Just some of them they have maybe links to the far right policy, but it's not a priori. It's not a general link. Yeah, to the culture wars, I agree with Jan Charvát. To the social issues, it is again connected with this racial and ethnic politics, because if they criticize, for example, the difficulties in social politics, they used recently the Ukrainian argument. They said that due to the aid to Ukrainian refugees, Czech families don't have money. Yeah? So that's strongly connected with this anti-migrant issue. And recently, we can really see and observe this anti-Ukrainian refugees hate in the Czech politics.
Thank you, Lenka.
Yeah, thank you. I guess this is our final round. I think this issue of far right diversifying or not diversifying of social issues to be one of the most sort of puzzling issues in comparative politics for me these days. I think there are a few answers to that. Number one, that abortion on demand is there's a societal consensus in the Czech Republic over the issue. It's a highly secular country, but there is high tolerance for physical abuse of women, so not everything is great. But I think the answer is that there is a market of parties and there is a diversification of portfolios. So a lot of the politicians or voices that advocate for very restrictive, let's say, abortion issues and anti-Islamic convention are in Christian Democratic Party, which is a party linked ideologically to the Catholic Church, which makes sense. Civic Democratic Party and ANO. So it's actually very often the case that the mainstream parties take on this portfolio and can weaponize it in political competition. The Czech far right so far seems to be really ethnic. And the issue is also, if as a party, if you are switching your portfolio, how credible you are. And the thing is whether the far right sometimes has to sort of stick to what they own, and they have issue ownership, and it's difficult to diversify. And I think the SPD is a party that delivers ideology, and good luck serving in a governing coalition where being a niche ideological party is just not enough, because voters will expect more than ideology eventually. I mean that's the huge advantage of ANO, that ANO has the machinery and the ability to both deliver, because of the power of the purse, but it's a party that has a track record of very successful targeted delivery and really being able to push certain policies through. The far right does not have any track record of that sort so far. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks a lot. I think that we have reached 1 hour and a half, so it's a priori the limit of this webinar. So we will left some eventual questions opened. For instance, I should have questioned the notion of westernization of the Czech far right, and what was also for me one of the questions that I wanted to ask was, for instance, a sort of reversed view of the current Czech far right, in the sense that it helps also the normalization of the European far right. Especially, it is also linked to the question we also have commented about the positioning of ANO. In fact, when ANO is a part of the Patriots, de facto it also is also usable as a legitimation of the other far right and their normalization. But I think that we have to finish. So I will thank a lot all the contributors, all the persons who asked questions, of course, all the person present. And last but not least, of course, I wanted to thank Jean-Michel for the organization of this very interesting webinar. Thank you and bye.